former Premier of Ontario, Madame Kathleen Wynne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate all of you for inviting me to speak in support of Bill S-233. The idea of a guaranteed basic income for Canadians most in need of support is not a new one, and I think all of the senators recognize that. There's already a range of programs in place that provide that exact guarantee to certain groups in our society, but not all. The Guaranteed Annual Income System Supplement in Ontario is provided on top of old age security payment for seniors in need. The Ontario Child Benefit and the Federal Canada Child Benefit guarantee a supplement to families with children. The Canada Disability Benefit to be introduced will supplement provincial support. So those programs are already in place, and we see demonstrable benefits from those. When I became Premier of Ontario in 2013, our government was about to receive a report from Mr. Munir Sheikh and Francis Lankin, one of your colleagues, and they had done a review of our social assistance program because we were looking for ways to improve a system that was not working as it should. The task had been to recommend changes to make the system more rational, more dignified, more supportive of people, both who could enter the workforce, for example, to allow recipients to own more assets and earn more money, but still not lose benefits, and for those who could not enter the workforce. However, the authors were not asked to comment on the adequacy of social assistance programs. In other words, the amount of money that was received. I became increasingly concerned that our efforts would amount to no more than a sort of incrementalist approach around the edges of a system that had demonstrated that it already did not succeed in lifting people out of poverty. I had been impressed by the work done in Manitoba in the Mincome pilot in the 1970s, and I know Evelyn may talk more about that. And as a member of our government's Poverty Reduction Committee, we were tasked with providing input into our poverty reduction legislation. As Premier, I was looking for tangible improvements in people's lives as a result of a government program that would support involvement in community, including work placements, encourage school retention, and potentially support improved health outcomes. And those were all anecdotal benefits of the Mincome project. And I just want to say, having listened to the parliamentary budget officer, it's so clear that we do not look at the cost savings of having those benefits in place. So I don't think we can assess the impact of a guaranteed basic income unless we understand that there will be savings as a result of those improved lives. So those were exactly the kinds of outcomes that we were starting to see as a result of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot before it was canceled by the current Ford government in Ontario. And despite the fact that the current government had promised to maintain the pilot for the 3-year duration. It was not maintained, and so we did not get the evidence that we were looking for. I had turned in the setting up of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot to Hugh Siegel, your former colleague, to help us. We used the report that Hugh produced as a basis for the Ontario pilot, and in designing the pilot, we took a lot of care to attach real dollar amounts to the program so that the researchers would be able to draw concrete conclusions about the cost of the model. We budgeted a total of $50 million over 3 years to support 4,000 people, plus setup costs and evaluation and maintenance of health benefits for social assistance clients. It seemed to me that we had the evidence from the supplements that are already in place that I already enumerated, that such a system can work and can make a substantial difference in people's lives, while the social assistance programs in place for people of Ontario between the ages of 18 and 64 were often humiliating, inadequate. They were ineffective traps, keeping people from breaking out of intergenerational poverty. At the same time, we were grappling with the realities, and we still are, of technology displacing workers across all sectors of employment, of industry, commerce, and service. We have made a decision as a society that we are not interested in institutionalizing people, and yet we have not put the supports in place in the community that are needed. On a daily basis, we hear from cities, towns, villages across this country about homelessness, food insecurity crises that are not abating. So I think that right now the Canadian government has an opportunity to develop cross-jurisdictional supports for most vulnerable Canadians. I had always hoped that the Canadian government would work with us and other subnational jurisdictions who had expressed an interest to test the implementation of a guaranteed livable income as a national strategy, and that can happen now. We actually know that the cost of not putting these supports in place is visible to us. It's visible to us all socially, in terms of health outcomes, and in the reality of increasing income inequality. The Canadian government has the opportunity right now to lay out a transition to a better way. And I'm just going to bring Hugh Siegel into this because I know we are thinking of him, so many of us, and he would have loved to be here to have this conversation. From his book, Bootstraps Need Boots, he says, simply put, my life experience has shown me that poverty is a cause of much of the dysfunction that our societies need to address. It is not rocket science to figure out that someone can live a better life at 70% of the poverty line than at 45%. Or that a basic income design that encourages work will be more helpful for a dynamic and growing society than a welfare regime that discourages it. There are people sitting in your committee room today, because I've seen them on my screen, who benefited from the basic income, who got back into work, who were able to put themselves back into the community in a good way. And I believe that we have an opportunity right now to look at the entire picture of what a program like this could offer to people in this country. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
I'm going to start with Ms. Wynne because you've lived the experience. Yes. So was there ever an evaluation of the program or an interim evaluation? Because it seems like that's what we're lacking in a lot of these cases.
Well, we had hoped, Senator, and in the election in 2018, the opposition party at the time said that they would continue the pilot, but as soon as the Ford government was elected, they canceled it in the first years. I'm sorry to tell you that we don't have the statistical evidence. What we do have is anecdotal evidence, Senator.
Yes, that was my next question. Do you have? Yes.
Absolutely. You know, I visited with people who, during the time that I was still premier, I visited with people who were on the basic income, and then after the program was canceled, I became part of the conversation with people who had the experience. And what we found was exactly what both the other panelists have talked about. We found that people were more motivated and more able to get into the workplace. I met with a man, for example, who was able to get his car back on the road and get back into work. He had to leave the workforce to look after his mom, had fallen into poverty and had gotten stuck. And when the basic income pilot came along, he was able to actually get back into the workforce. I met young people who were able to buy some clothes in order to be able to apply for jobs and also go back to school. So it's all anecdotal, but we did see the kinds of movement and the kind of security and calm that came from having just that extra bit of cash. You know, it was $17,000 a year. It's not a lot of money that was given to each recipient, but it was enough that the worries about putting food on the table and having something to wear to work and having transportation to get to work started to be less of an issue.
Why now, and how would this assist people to deal with the current crises we're seeing? What's really holding us back, if you can expand more on what each of you were just saying?
So the what's holding us back, I think it was interesting what Professor Forget said, that times are always tough, you know, that whenever we propose, and I'm reminded when we in Ontario said we were going to raise the minimum wage to $14, you know, 4 years before business had said it's not the right time. 4 years later, when the economy was better in 2017, they said the time's not right. So I think there's always going to be an argument that this is too expensive, we can't afford it, the time's not right. I would suggest to you that some of the issues that we've already raised, that you just enumerated, are reaching crisis proportions, and that we have tried a lot of things that haven't worked. And now I think it's time to try something that we actually know does work. Putting money in people's hands. I mean, both Professor Zhao and Professor Forget have talked about the realities of that in other programs. We saw it in Ontario. And so I think it's time that we use what we know and design a program that we know is going to help.